Life sure is tough ahead. Who would have thought? Paralysis from the waist down, all because you didn't listen to your in-laws. From the landline speaker, the energetic voice of Bethany, my MIL, could be heard. One afternoon at the family home. Mom, Terza, holding the receiver, looked confused, glancing at me with a puzzled expression, as if she didn't understand what was being said. Apparently, someone had an accident, and for some reason, this seemed to be a cause for celebration. With a baffled look, my mother asked Bethany, what do you mean by tough? Bethany, on the other end of the phone, laughed heartily as we exchanged confused looks. Having lost Dottie, my FIL, early on, Bethany had expressed a desire to live with me and Neely because I've been living alone for so long, it's lonely, she said. Initially, she said she didn't need rent or help with household chores, but within 2 months. That was just adult politeness. It's only natural to pay a token of gratitude. She had changed her tune, leading to repeated arguments between us, Neely and her. In the end, unable to mend our relationship and at Neely's suggestion, I was in the process of moving out of the in-laws' place, going back and forth to my parents' house to move my things. Bethany, with her nasty nature, made my life difficult daily. Just like when she hurled unpleasant words at me, she bluntly told my mom, "That's why, son's wife. Your stupid daughter failed to brake and caused a major accident. It's utterly ridiculous." Shocked, I spontaneously spoke up towards the speaker. "Son's wife, you mean me? I'm fine, though." "What accident are you talking about?" "My name is Kaylin. I'm 35 years old and currently work as a salesperson for luxury accessories at a department store. Having graduated from college, I've been employed at an accessory shop for nearly 15 years. Though I'm considered a veteran in the workforce, responding to new trends and customer demands is both fun and fulfilling, and I work energetically every day. The age range at work is broad, but as the sales are primarily women's accessories, the staff is predominantly female. Among them, I'm one of the few singles. Though I desired marriage and engaged in matchmaking activities, including friend introductions, I hadn't found a suitable match by the age of 35. Thus, I decided to take a step forward and opened the door to a marriage consultation office. I earnestly listened to the counselor, detailed my values and lifestyle. And, after considering whether we matched, I met Neely, an engineer. He was a year older, pleasant to talk to, and the way he shyly listened to my stories left a very good impression. As we continued to date and learn more about each other, I couldn't help but let my salesperson spiel slip out now and then. But as I talked with him, any stiffness I felt gradually melted away. After meeting a few times, Neely would often talk about his favorite novels, and I found myself nodding along, a stark contrast to our initial interactions where I was the one doing most of the talking. Eventually, we both agreed that we would not find a better match than each other. And based on our deep trust, we decided to get married. We were looking for a new home near Neely's childhood home. Dottie had passed away early but left behind a substantial inheritance, and Bethany, the mother-in-law, continued to live there alone. Neely had moved out after getting a job and rarely came back. It seemed Bethany had been feeling anxious for a long time, and one day, she expressed a desire to live with us. "Being alone all this time makes the loneliness accumulate, and at my age, I have to worry about illness and injuries, don't I? Instead of looking for a new house, I don't need rent if you could live with me here. That way, we could spend more time together, and of course, I wouldn't interfere with a newlywed couple. Could you please consider easing my anxiety?" When we visited to greet her, Bethany seemed gentle and modest. "We'll keep our living areas separate, and since I'm not working, I'll take care of the housework and cleaning," she said. The loneliness of living alone was palpable, and Neely and I couldn't ignore Bethany. Moreover, we had been planning to start infertility treatments, hoping for a child in the future. The treatment would require a long-term commitment and significant medical expenses. We had planned to cut back on our living expenses, but living with the in-laws was supposed to provide not just savings, but also some financial leeway for these treatments. This made us considerably positive about the idea of living together. Honestly, I think it's a wish come true. It's better than living just the two of us in the neighborhood and then moving in together later. It saves us from changing our lifestyle multiple times and wasting money on moving, Neely said. I agree. I don't want Bethany to look so lonely. Living with the in-laws was tense due to the mother-in-law and daughter-in-law relationship, but it seemed like the best solution financially for us and mentally for Bethany. After much discussion, we decided to move in with the in-laws. Upon hearing our decision, Bethany said, "Thank you, truly. Being with family is the greatest happiness." And she cried tears of joy. We moved our belongings in, and our new life began smoothly. However, just a few months later, Bethany's attitude had completely changed. One day, she suddenly said to me with a stern face, "You're always coming home late. What's going on? You say it's work, but is it really? Retail work should end when the customers leave. It's strange that you don't come home until this late after the department store closes. Where exactly are you working?" Caught off guard by her sudden accusation, I was at a loss for words. Furthermore, "So, when are you quitting?" Bethany continued. "I am entrusted with a position of responsibility. My job involves more than just sales, such as attending meetings at the department store and other stores, so it's not unusual for me to work overtime, especially during busy periods." Naturally, Neely knew this and supported me without complaint, even when I came home later than him. I was taken aback by the suggestion that I should quit my job and stay at home, leaving me confused. "After all, if you're married, you should devote yourself to the home. How long do you plan to work? In my time, such a thing was unthinkable. If I knew you were that kind of woman, I would have never allowed my son to marry you." Bethany, I value my work, and Neely and I have decided to support each other while living our lives. Continuing my job is a choice made by both me and Neely. I managed to argue back, trembling. However, Bethany became even more stern and scoffed at my words. "A woman working only disrupts the home. Kaylin, you have a responsibility to look after the home while Neely is away. You need to understand that." My side of the story was not heard, and Bethany only insisted on me resigning. Gradually, Bethany's delusions escalated, suggesting, "You're not coming home because you have something to hide," which prompted me to hastily discuss the matter with Neely for mediation. Of course, I had nothing to hide. Neely was surprised by Bethany's sudden change but intervened and reprimanded her. Though she seemed dissatisfied, it seemed she had given up on me to some extent, settling for grumbling. However, the snide remarks towards me did not cease. Instead, she suddenly said, "Aren't you ever going to start paying rent?" "Huh? But in the beginning, you said rent wasn't necessary, that living here was enough. Even in close relationships, there's a need for courtesy. Aren't you ashamed to live here for free? Really, for a job you want to keep so badly, one would think you're earning a princely sum, but it turns out it's not much at all." Bethany started to go back on her initial conditions, attempting to break the promise. Despite having an inheritance, Neely and I cover most of the day-to-day expenses. It's hard to believe she has any financial grievances. Yet, she claimed, the conditions for living together were just out of consideration, putting us in a difficult position. Fed up with her disrespectful behavior, I firmly responded to Bethany. We came here because you said rent wasn't necessary. But if that's not the case, then Neely and I are prepared to leave right away. Suddenly, Bethany's face turned red with anger. Ungrateful! You don't even pay rent, let alone a token of gratitude! Causing a commotion. It seemed she wanted to argue that, even if not rent, you should at least offer some token of gratitude for letting you live here. Instead of rent, we were asked to make payments as a token of gratitude, but financially, it made no difference. Furthermore, the amount Bethany suggested was significantly higher than the going rate for nearby apartments. After discussing it with Neely, we decided to give her a certain amount each month. She must want some pocket money. She's been living modestly on her own for a while. If a little indulgence can be covered with money, then it should be cheap, Neely said, sounding resigned as if he was also having a hard time dealing with Bethany. Although we didn't agree to the requested amount, we decided to give her a smaller sum as pocket money, which temporarily stopped Bethany's attacks. Although it was unsatisfying, just when we thought one problem was resolved, another incident occurred. Suddenly, Neely's sister, Cheryl, returned home. Cheryl, who had been married and living elsewhere, had divorced for some reason. One day, she arrived unexpectedly with a large trunk, declaring, "I'll be living here from today on. It might come as a surprise, but my husband was cheating on me. So, I slapped the divorce papers on him and left. Don't worry, I've been a housewife for a long time, so I won't be any trouble." Despite her words, "For dinner, let's go out for steak, it'll be a treat," Cheryl demanded. Bethany seemed pleased that Cheryl had returned, clearly siding with her. Cheryl's ex-husband was a wealthy executive, and Cheryl's flashy brand name belongings were noticeable. Imagining her future spending habits made me worried. We had only met a few times during engagement and wedding ceremonies. Being 4 years older, at 40, the slight age difference made our conversations awkward. Moreover, upon learning about my job, "You get an employee discount, right? Why don't you get me some stuff for free? We're family after all," she outrageously said. Both Neely and I were stunned. When I refused, she glared at me irritably and lost interest, saying, "Oh, really? Kaylin is so inconsiderate." "Well, considering your age, I guess Neely was desperate," Cheryl said nonchalantly, pushing me closer to my limit. Bethany would complain, "My back hurts. Don't overwork me," leaving all the housework to me. Despite being employed and Cheryl being unemployed, when I suggested sharing the workload, she resisted, saying, "I'm tired from the divorce drama. I didn't come back to be slaved around." The workload at home only increased. Although Neely tried to help, as an engineer working every day, he was often too exhausted when he got home. Eventually, my stress reached a breaking point. I started crying unexpectedly, had sleepless nights, and the thought of starting fertility treatments became impossible. My condition deteriorated to the point where I considered seeking counseling for some relief. Seeing my distressed state, "Let's move out immediately," Neely proposed. "It's absurd for you to endure this, and I can't let you suffer because of Bethany and the others indefinitely. I'm sorry for not prioritizing you over them. But the money for that. We can't be worrying about expenses now. Your health is what's most important." With that, Neely immediately began searching for a new place for us. However, it was precisely the season for graduations, new school and job starts. Meaning affordable properties were snapped up quickly, indicating our move from the in-laws might take some time. Meanwhile, Cheryl's attitude only continued to deteriorate without any sign of connection. I used somewhat expensive cosmetics and accessories for my role as a salesperson. Being unemployed, Cheryl had little money to spare. It seemed she envied my possessions, as I started noticing things going missing or being moved. When confronted, she admitted to it. So what? I like this brand too. Borrowing a bit shouldn't be an issue, right? These are my personal items. Please don't use them without asking. Complaining about using a lipstick or borrowing a necklace for a day. We're family, so don't get irritated. Despite my repeated warnings, she would bring Bethany into it, and they would both complain to me together. Bethany, with an exasperated sigh, would tell me, "You should be more accommodating." She blamed me for it. With the situation not improving, I resorted to securing my belongings in a lockable box, only for the lock to be forcefully broken. Standing before the ruined remnants of the small lock, my anger burst forth. I've repeatedly warned you, and now the lock's been broken. If you can't even respect the basic courtesy of not touching others' belongings, then living together is simply impossible. I'm leaving. Declaring this to them, I started packing my belongings into a large bag hastily. Bethany, enraged, followed me, persisting in her anger. Think it over. Can't you endure that much? Realizing I was unmoved, she began making a call somewhere. That call was to my parents' house. Whether Terza answered the phone. What kind of upbringing have you given Kaylin? Was heard as a complaint. What Terza replied is unknown, but eventually, I received a call. Was that call from Bethany? She said some really odd things. Kaylin, are you all right? Are things not going well with Bethany? After explaining the situation to Terza, who became incensed on my behalf. Come back home immediately. She insisted. Neely, upon hearing the details later, assured. Once we find a new place, I'll come to get you. Prompting me to leave. I began packing in earnest, and the following day, I departed from the in-laws. Neither Bethany nor anyone else came to see me off or attempted to persuade me to stay. While commuting between my parents' home, the in-laws, and work, I planned to pack up my belongings at the in-laws. A few weeks later, with an afternoon shift ahead, I spent the morning cleaning at my parents' house. Then, the phone rang. Terza, upon checking. It's Bethany. And she answered with a puzzled face. As Terza took the call, her expression turned odd, and she signaled me. It seemed Bethany was saying something bizarre over the phone. Switching to speaker, a familiar boisterous voice came through, sounding too cheerful. Life's going to be tough ahead. Who would have thought she'd end up like this? Who exactly is having a tough time? What do you mean? That's what I'm saying, son's wife. It's karma, I guess. Your foolish daughter caused a major accident because her brakes failed. We exchanged looks. An accident? I hadn't stepped out of my parents' house this morning. Bethany, even happier, kept talking. Causing a major accident before even getting to work. It's all because she didn't quit. It's just absurd. The situation was too confusing with too many unanswered questions. Interrupting Bethany, I spoke into the speaker. Son's wife, you mean me? I'm fine, though. What accident are you talking about? What? Really? What do you mean? Bethany was clearly flustered. It was a poorly executed prank call, yet the content was baffling. Demanding an explanation. Why are you all right? If not you, then whose accident is it? Bethany only grew more panicked. Amidst our back and forth, an agitated Neely appeared at my parents' house. Grabbing my shoulder as he rushed in, he seemed relieved to see I was unharmed. Kaylin, I'm glad you're safe. What's going on? Between Bethany and you, Neely, what happened? Suddenly, Cheryl had an accident. Neely revealed. Cheryl did? It's a relief you weren't involved, Kaylin. We're heading to the hospital now. Will you come with us? Agreeing to Neely's request, I took the afternoon off and we hurried to the hospital. Upon arrival, we learned Cheryl was still undergoing treatment but was in no life-threatening condition and remained conscious. Bethany, who was also there and had been upset, along with Neely, first breathed a sigh of relief at the news. Then, we went back and forth between the hospital and the in-laws, gathering necessities for Cheryl's hospital stay until her treatment concluded. Cheryl, carried into the hospital room, looked exhausted but was lying in bed, capable of conversation. Neely approached her side to hear her story. I got into the car to go to work this morning. But then, the brakes stopped working on the way, and I crashed into a utility pole. I heard no one else was involved, but Yeah, it was a street with no pedestrians, so no one else was involved. But Cheryl's back. We had already heard about the after-effects of the injuries from the self-inflicted accident. Cheryl was saved by prompt rescue but had severely injured her back. As a result, she's currently paralyzed from the waist down. She can't move her legs or walk, and living independently is out of the question. And it's almost certain that the paralysis will remain as a permanent after-effect. Upon hearing the doctor's explanation, Cheryl declared, I can't believe this is happening. I'll sue the maintenance company. Attempting to lash out in tears, but Neely easily restrained her since she could only move her upper body. Indeed, the brake failure seemed like a maintenance fault. I noticed Bethany in the corner of the room turning pale. Bethany, are you okay? Despite being treated poorly, I couldn't harbor resentment in such a situation. Concerned by her pallid complexion, Bethany remained silent when I addressed her. Then, do you have any idea about this? Neely asked. His voice was so cold and stern that I was startled and looked at him. I'm asking if you know anything about Cheryl's car accident. Bethany, trembling and pale. No. She shook her head. Despite Neely's repeated inquiries, her responses remained the same. No, I don't know. Denying it, but an uneasy feeling grew inside me. Neely excused himself to Cheryl and began operating her smartphone. All family vehicles were equipped with dash cams, which could be checked for several weeks of footage through a dedicated app. When Neely retrieved Cheryl's car data and pressed play, we were about to witness a shocking scene. This is Bethany, right? Lights turned on in the garage's frame, revealing Bethany. She peered into the car from beyond the hood. She seemed to be carrying something, repeatedly approaching the front of Cheryl's car and squatting down. Since the dashcam recorded both video and audio, sounds of something being dragged and her muttering were audible. It's so heavy, how difficult. Is it this way? Yes, this line should be correct. From the occasional words, it was clear she was searching for something under the car. Then a loud snap was heard. She was cutting something underneath the vehicle. Cheryl and I immediately understood what she was doing, feeling the blood drain from our faces. Confronted with the footage, Bethany began to tremble violently. From Bethany's voice in the video, a chilling sentence was heard. This will send that daughter-in-law straight to hell. The call to my parents' house now made sense. Bethany had intended for me to be the victim of an accident. But instead, it was Cheryl who had the accident. It was clear she mistook my car for Cheryl's, but her tampering was now undeniable. I can't believe it. What were you planning to do if I had died? Furious with the truth, Cheryl confronted her. I couldn't tell the cars apart. Bethany blurted out in panic. The mix-up had a somewhat unavoidable reason. By chance, Cheryl and I had cars of the same make and color. A common black, domestic compact car. We were both surprised when Cheryl moved back in, as we discovered our cars were identical. My parents' house lacked parking space, so my car was left at the in-laws. Since I planned to move out completely, I left it there except for when needed for work. It was unlikely for us to confuse our cars. We each had designated parking spots in the garage. However, Cheryl often took liberties, choosing whichever spot was more convenient for her at the moment. Despite repeated warnings, the issue never resolved, making it understandable that Bethany couldn't distinguish between them. I had used my car the day before, but upon returning, found Cheryl's car in my spot. Uninterested in conversing, I parked in her spot and went straight to my parents. Bethany, unaware of these circumstances and not knowledgeable about cars, unwittingly tampered with it. Cheryl sobbed bitterly. "It's Mom's fault for not checking properly," she lashed out at Bethany. Bethany, possibly panicked, began to irrationally lash out. "Why didn't you park in the right place? It's your fault for not parking properly. What are you going to do now with your body like that?" "What do you mean, what am I going to do? It's my fault. It's because of Mom. It's not an accident, it's an incident you caused." Their accusations filled the hospital, creating chaos. Neely took me out of the room once for intentionally tampering with the car. He called the police, citing that as the reason. Due to the recent accident, the police arrived promptly to address the situation. After submitting the dashcam footage and the recordings from the moment we entered the hospital room, Bethany was taken away on the spot. Amidst the commotion and turning pale, Bethany was led away, and Cheryl, with tear-swollen eyes, slowly turned to me and Neely, asking, "Hey, we're not strangers, we're family. Even if Mom isn't here, you'll take care of me, right?" She subtly inquired about future care and support. "No," Neely immediately responded with a firm. As an engineer who has worked with cars, Neely glared at Cheryl, clearly dissatisfied. "The accident's cause partly lies with you. If the brake hose was cut, a warning light should have come on. Plus, if the brake fluid was drained, you'd notice the pedal feeling odd right away. You should have stopped driving the moment you felt something was wrong, instead of forcing it and ending up severely injured. From my point of view, you're the one at fault here," Neely said, cutting her off sharply, and then began to play a video on his smartphone. "Take a look," he said. The video from Cheryl's dashcam showed a different time than before. This morning, before the accident, as she was about to leave for work. Of course, Cheryl was in the frame, clearly struggling to load a heavy object into her car. The object looked like a small safe, which I recognized and exclaimed, "Isn't that your watch safe?" Surprised, I voiced out, and Neely nodded with a stern expression. For some reason, Cheryl was attempting to transport Neely's valuable watch safe, which he had kept secure. Appearing suspicious and rushed, she loaded the safe into the car without checking her surroundings or even buckling her seatbelt, then tried to drive out of the garage. This entire sequence played out before us, with her face turning as pale as Bethany's had earlier. Neely, not allowing any escape, pressed her. "Will you talk?" Cheryl began to confess something unbelievable. Initially, she left for work in the car, Cheryl had explained, but she actually planned to take the safe and the watch to sell everything. She didn't have the key to the safe, but thought she could break it upon arrival. Right after moving the car, she noticed the brakes felt odd but panicked to get away from the in-laws' house before anyone found out, leading to her pressing the accelerator and causing the accident. Cheryl tried to explain through tears, but Neely looked down on her with disdain. "I needed the money right away to pay back to my husband. I just thought of borrowing a little bit," she said. Cheryl returned home after her divorce, but she was lying even then. I came back because my husband cheated on me. But it was actually the other way around. It was Cheryl who had an affair. She returned to her parents' house because she ran out of savings due to being sued for alimony and couldn't afford to live alone. She disliked sharing the embarrassing story of owing alimony, so she made her ex-husband out to be the villain to protect herself. Since moving back, she hadn't worked, making it impossible to see an end to her unpaid alimony. Cheryl resorted to secretly selling valuable items from the house to get by, but there's a limit to everything. Eventually, she set her sights on Neely's expensive watch, leading to the accident. Thinking about the alimony stressed me out. But I felt better while bossing Kaylin around with Mom. That's why I did those horrible things. I'll change, please don't abandon me. Starting to despair about her future, she pleaded in a cloying tone, but seeing the cold looks from me and Neely, she seemed to realize she was at a disadvantage. Suddenly changing her tone. Don't run away, and support yourself. Take care of me, she yelled. Given her past behavior, such demands were out of the question. I still have alimony left. I was the one who ended up in an accident instead of you. Ungrateful, ruining someone's life. You too should pay for it. Me and Neely listened silently as Cheryl, perhaps exhausted from the day, began to rant incoherently. Her commotion brought several nurses running, prompting Neely and me to leave the room. Then, let's never come back here again. We agreed. Later, the police asked if Neely had any friends or acquaintances knowledgeable about cars. As Bethany's actions constituted a crime and arrest was inevitable. However, it remained unclear how Bethany, who didn't drive or know much about cars, came up with the idea to cut the brake hose or how she obtained the tools to do so. Neither Neely nor I could think of anyone who fit the description. A few days later, the investigation revealed the truth. Bethany had been infatuated with a young man named Billy, whom she met before our marriage, paying him large sums of money. He was a con artist targeting older women, pretending to date them to swindle money. Bethany, having depleted her inheritance and living expenses on dates with him, proposed living with us when her finances tightened. Unsatisfied, she tried to collect money under the guise of rent and gratuity, but we refused, citing repeated breaches of agreement. Desperate, Bethany consulted the man, who suggested a dreadful idea. If the son's wife dies, the son, being the husband, would receive insurance money. With that, you could live luxuriously every day. Bethany, already under the man's influence, eagerly purchased the specified tools and proceeded with the plan. However, the car tampered with was Cheryl's, leading to the tragedy. The young man's identity was also uncovered. Interrogated. I did talk, but it was all jokes. I didn't tell her what to buy, I said nothing. He denied everything. He admitted to repeating date-like encounters with Bethany, not for romance, but for her financial generosity. I wasn't serious, so I wouldn't incite a crime, he argued. However, police investigation found evidence that the plan to steal my insurance money from Neely was seriously concocted. Further crimes, including blackmail against other women, were revealed. Thus, the man was also arrested alongside Bethany. After the trial, Bethany received a prison sentence. Cheryl, hoping for care, contacted her ex-husband, only to be rebuffed and urged to pay the settlement from their divorce court promptly. She started using a welfare services helper, but was so rough and demanding that private services increasingly refused her. Eventually, no one was willing to cater to her whims, leaving her with a stern, unyielding helper. Cheryl complained, "She's too formal and cold. I want someone kind, with warmth." However, no one willing to tolerate Cheryl's unreasonable demands emerged, and the stern helper remained her caregiver. my environment also changed. Because this incident greatly worried my parents, I requested a transfer to a different store closer to my home. This request was granted, and I happily began working near my parents' house. Neely felt uncomfortable staying in the town with the in-laws, so he decided to change jobs and move closer to my parents' home. It's a fresh start in a new place, but he always takes care of me. I caused trouble. The watch Neely had stolen by Cheryl was returned to us by the police after the investigation, though the safe was damaged by the accident's impact. Some of the watches inside were broken, but Neely decided to make these a memento of the entire family. Determined to cut ties with the in-laws. We both have gotten used to the new environment. Now, we are choosing a hospital to start infertility treatments, which was our original goal.